I tell you, the history of this place is wasted on the public. The arena's first heroes, our land's heritage. But do people care? No. People don't want history. They want the heroes of today. Still, I suppose every era needs its own heroes. The 1980s is known for a lot of things, such as the beginning of many bands such as Metallica, Joan Jett, Blondie, Queen, and so many more. The 1980s is also known for so many movie classics such as The Shining, Dead Poets Society, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The 1980s is also, just like the 90s, known for its crazy hairstyles and crazy fashion. Hello, my name is Andraste, and today we're going over another history over another well-known game company. The company is known as Lionhead, and if you guys don't know who Lionhead is, you might have heard of them if you're a fan of the Fable series. With news that the Fable series is continuing even after Lionhead kind of went down the drain in 2016, it kind of made me interested, especially after going through like BioWare and kind of getting the history and like why BioWare is kind of in the state that it's in right now. What has caused some of these other companies that have games that I love, like what happened to them? Was their experience similar to BioWare and any other well-known company? Even though Lionhead didn't have as many well-known games besides Fable, it was still a huge staple and deserves the recognition. And so many well-known devs worked hard to get the Fable series out. And that's why I kind of want to make a video, is to not only talk about all the hardships that these devs went through, but also pay homage to one of the most expansive RPG games during the time, but also one of the most overpromised. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But I digress. Let's get into everything.
Hey, you. You're finally awake.
Before Lionhead Studios, there was a small company known as Bullfrog Productions. This was started in 1987 by a well-known, and this van is, I hope you're not playing a drinking game, because I swear if you took a drink every single time I mentioned this man's name throughout this video, you would get alcohol poisoning. So viewer discretion, please do not drink every single time I mention this person's name. I'm just gonna warn you, you're gonna end up throwing up. Bullfrog Productions was founded by a guy named Peter Molyneux, don't drink, and Les Edgar. It was founded in 1987 by a small team of 35. It came out with games such as Dungeon Keeper, Populous, Theme Park, and another game called Syndicate. During the late 1980s, early 1990s, not only did his name start getting out there in the video game industry, he also had Bullfrog join EA to expand on some projects. Molyneux's silver tongue and quick talking raised him through the ranks of EA, and he actually became VP to the EA brand. So a common thing that usually happens whenever a small company joins a bigger one is that it goes from more like a family-like setting to kind of more of an office, kind of more productive related versus creative related. And this is kind of the problem that Peter said that he felt. Wow, this kind of sounds familiar. Haha. I wonder where we've heard this before. Part of the reason Bullfrog Productions was even started in the first place was to keep a small team, and after they signed with EA, it just became too much for them. And this was the birth of Lionhead Studios. Not only Peter Molyneux, but a couple other people left the company, such as Mark Weebly and Steve Jackson. Lionhead comes out with Black and White in 2001, and this game puts them on the map. Shortly after the success of Black and White, they come out with a couple satellite studios. Their biggest and most important, and also another name that I'm going to be mentioning a million freaking times during this video, is Big Blue Box. Big Blue Box was mostly filled with devs that came from Bullfrog, but two of the most important devs, Simon and Dean Carter, and they were brothers. So despite that Peter Molyneux kind of gets all the credit for Fable and it being known as his baby, he wasn't actually the mind behind Fable. Some of the ideas that he had for the game actually became issues in the future, but we'll get into that later. Before Fable's initial release in 2004, the project went through ups and downs. The company had less than 20 employees, including Simon and Dean at this time, and at first they weren't really being rushed by Microsoft, their publisher. They were able to tell them how far along on the game they were going, and Microsoft at first was very understanding and was not pushing them at all, and overall the vibes were pretty alright. Despite the fact, however, they were working really hard on the game, this began to change towards the end of the development. Even though Big Blue Box was working hard with its short staff, they weren't necessarily going fast enough for Microsoft, and Microsoft ended up pushing them towards a deadline. This put Big Blue Box in a frenzy. Simon and Dean wanted to create the best RPG game that had ever been created before, and they had to do it in about 18 months. How are they supposed to finish this game? They were barely a quarter way done with it. At this point, this pushed Big Blue Box to work with Lionhead, even though Lionhead was a way bigger company. Lionhead had devs go over the Big Blue Box, and this caused a lot of friction between the two companies. People from Lionhead didn't know anything about the Fable game, and they didn't really care to. They had their own games, their own products that they had to come out, and their own due dates. The Big Blue Box employees didn't really like the idea of the mashup either, and there was just friction from both sides. During this time, Peter really oversold the idea that your hero would be able to shape the world that they were going into. Project Ego would later release in 2004, and even though it didn't reach the expectations that Molyneux had promised, it actually sold the most games out of any other game that month. So any game that was released in the same month as the original Fable, it sold way more. So despite the game being way over promised, it did really well and was super successful. One thing that I've really seen from a lot of fans, especially going through the little bit of information about the process of creating the Fable series, a lot of people who didn't know what Fable was supposed to be grew up really enjoying the game. There were some people who were upset, especially regarding the fact that they thought there was going to be more choice-driven actions. But as I said, the game overall did extremely well and became the main focus for Lionhead. You would think this would be kind of a good thing, especially for Dean and Simon, who wanted to create the world's best RPG. But Fable wasn't exactly what they had envisioned. The story was lacking. They barely had time to write any of the dialogue. They really wanted Fable 2 to be kind of what they imagined an RPG to be. And luckily, Fable 2 had a much better process. Fable 2 actually was a complete 180. Also, side note, in 2005, a DLC called The Lost Chapters would come out for Fable, and it was highly acclaimed and really fun. It was a really good DLC, actually. Not only did it add new outfits, it actually added a new island and bonus content, which is really cool. And this is just my own personal opinion. I enjoyed the story, the original story to Fable. I know that technically it was rushed compared to Fable 2, and we'll talk more about that in a second, but I think the overall lore is just so much better than Fable 2, which is crazy Because for Fable 2, they were actually able to hire a team that was able to create a plot and script and everything, versus the original Fable where Simon and Dean actually wrote a lot of the dialogue. They felt like the dialogue and overall plot for Fable was lacking and could have just been a lot better, but personally for me, I enjoyed the story for the original Fable, but that's not the whole point of this. Despite the original success of Fable, however, Lionhead was in trouble. Its other two satellite companies, Intrepid, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, I don't know, and Black and White Studios were also creating other games, and these games did not turn out nearly as popular as Fable. During the time of the creation of Fable, there were 6 games altogether being worked on. Only 3 of these games, including Fable, would be released, 3 of them being canned. The other 2 games were known as the movies and Black and White 2. Both of these games failed for different reasons. An interesting thing that I actually found about the movies, which I found in this article, highly recommend if you want more information. It's actually a lot of the resources that I use to get this information and other videos. If you go to check out some of the people that I reference in this video as my references and credits, I highly recommend you either read this article or check out their videos who really dive more deep into them. But one of the reasons that the movies actually failed, the hot coffee scene from San Andreas, GTA.
Hey, does anybody want coffee? Who wants coffee? I just made a fresh pot of coffee. Does anybody want coffee?
The movies was kind of like a movie simulator where you could create your own movie, and the goal of the movies was for people to create their own and post them on YouTube. Molyneux thought that would be a lot of fun and thought that would be a good way to gain traction with fans and kind of grow the series. Kind of like, I don't know if you remember during the early 2000s or the late 2000s, early 2010s, but AMVs were super popular. MVs were in general, whether it was a cringy Naruto edit, RuneScape edit, or Call of Duty, just whatever the game was. Molyneux really wanted to capitalize this, and that was the goal, was to let people create their own movies and post them on YouTube. However, there was a problem with one of the skins that the devs had made. Apparently, there was a skin that you could choose when you were deciding what the main actress or actor was going to wear. Apparently, there was a skin where the actress would be wearing panties, and the color of the panties, like the mesh and the way that the detail kind of looked in the crotch, it kind of looked like pubic hair. It kind of looked like hair. They were terrified about getting sued, and this actually caused a lot of things to get pushed back, and it was a huge mess. They're even lucky that the movies made the deadline. I thought that was so interesting. It's so crazy how, like, one video game incident, especially one regarding legality, really affected another video game. Like, that just, when I found that out, that fucking...
Who wants coffee? Does anybody want coffee? Who wants coffee?
What the fuck is going on, man?
Do you want coffee?
Listen, you're fucking...
I just made coffee.
Molyneux realizes that maybe starting a bunch of companies at the same time wasn't necessarily the bad idea. He kind of pulls a Boogie 2988 and starts blaming financial advisors for his bad decisions.
Not to make any excuses, but keep in mind, I didn't come from mine.
Molyneux insists after the initial release and success of Black and White, bad advisors told him that it would be smarter for him to make sure that his games and companies could float on the stock market. That's why he created not only Lionhead Studios, but all these satellite companies.
Not to make any excuses, but keep in mind, I didn't come from mine.
This ended up being a huge disaster because since he started so many businesses at once, he had to come out with more games at once. And this just was a huge problem. Lionhead loses a lot of money during this time, and they only have one choice. They have to sell out. Despite the success of Fable, it wasn't enough, especially after 2 of their games got tanked and 3 didn't even hit the market. The initial success of Fable wasn't enough. With everything that happened with BioWare in my previous video, and just everything that we hear about, you know, smaller companies being bought out by bigger, it ended up being way better than the original experience with Fable. In 2008, Fable 2 comes out, and not only did it come out and do extremely well, the entire creation process was actually a great time. A lot of the devs weren't feeling rushed. A lot of work was being done on time. They even created a new engine for the game to try and do different things with the combat and other things that they just weren't able to experience with the first Fable. The only really bad thing that happened during the process of making Fable 2 was Peter Molyneux himself, actually. He didn't like that you had to pause and view the map in order to find where you needed to go. He wanted the game dev to create something similar to a breadcrumbs trail. Something that would make it easier for the protagonists to get to their final destination without needing a map. This annoyed not only the brothers but the other devs because they didn't really know how to do this with the new engine, and it actually took up a lot of time. Not only did it take up a lot of time, but they felt like there could have been other things added to the game if they didn't have to do this. Even saying, oh, well, there goes another monster, or there goes another fighting design. Rawr. Guard. Molyneux also is the reason that we got a dog. Dean and Simon were just like, what at this point? They were like, no. First the breadcrumb trail, now a dog? Why? Dude, what the fuck? Why do you want a fucking dog? He was like, listen to me. They're man's best friend. Everybody loves dogs. The brothers just kind of shook their head and were like, okay, fine, we'll add a fucking dog. And Molyneux was like, no. You're not just gonna add a motherfucking dog. This dog's gotta be important, okay? He's gotta be important to the story. And they just look at him wide-eyed, like, are you fucking, why? And it was added, which I think it was even said that he ended up being annoyed with the dog when playtesting the game. So pretty much you have to train the dog to do what you want it to do. And he just got annoyed with the tactics of and like the play mechanic of the dog, which is so funny. But yeah, he's the whole reason we got a dog, which ended up being like super loved. People, whenever they write the original game devs for Fable and Fable 2, they usually mention the dog, which is so fucking funny. It comes out with the DLC exactly a year after the Not Whole Clay DLC comes out in 2009. Fable 2 comes out and it's a massive success. Like, oh my god. So you think, wow, the production, wow, there was literally, like, there was little to no issues with the production of Fable 2, besides Peter Molyneux and his breadcrumb and dog obsession. Other than that, like, everything went really well. So obviously Fable 3, everything's gonna go fantastic, right? Right?
Not to make any excuses, I didn't come for money.
No. Not right, apparently. There was a huge shift in the industry around 2010. The Wii was at its high point. Everybody was pretty much on the Wii's dick. Excuse me. Sony was working on their own thing. Of course, Microsoft had to do the same thing. So Microsoft was really pushing for all their game studios to do things with the Kinect. If you don't know what the Kinect is, or if you weren't alive or very well developed to know what the Kinect is, the Kinect was pretty much like a camera. So it's very similar to like the Wii, but the Wii didn't have a camera. Instead, you didn't need a remote for the Kinect. It was kind of cool with games, for example, like Just Dance. Just Dance was actually a lot of fun on it, but everything else was kind of like cheap party game gimmicks, and the Kinect didn't really last in popularity for that long. Microsoft still pushed companies during this time to do things regarding the Kinect, and this affected the Fable 3 production. Fable 3's rushed for development and comes out 18 months later. So versus having about 4 years to work on a game, they barely had 2. Before Fable comes out, Microsoft tries releasing a beta for another game that regards AI, and it's like a story between, like, I think a mother and a son or something like that, and it gets made fun of really really badly, like super badly, to the point that it gets completely canned after it gets like showcased at a show. Because of this, all the hard work that they put into Fable, making it related to a Kinect game, gets scrapped. And this kind of messes with the production. Sadly, there's not a lot of information that I could find specifically regarding the Fable 3 development, but based off the amount that they had to rush the game, it kind of reminds me of what I said in my previous video. If you don't give a dev team enough time or enough materials to create the product that they are looking for, you are going to come out with a half-baked product. Like, imagine giving a baker half amount of the time to bake a cake and only half the ingredients and be like, I want a wedding cake. No, I won't give you the icing. No, I won't give you the flour. No, I won't give you the yeast, but I want it to be a wedding cake and I want it done in 30 minutes. So Fable 3 comes out and it is a, well, let's just say disappointment. A lot of fans just do not like Fable 3. With Fable 2, they tried to do something different with the combat system. With Fable 2, they tried to do it so you kind of were on it was like a pacing system. It would reward you for striking an enemy and blocking an enemy at the correct time, kind of similar to like a Dark Souls game. While Fable 3 was just kind of button mashing. They kind of got rid of this feature and didn't really reward the character. Not only was just the overall vibe of the game completely different, the story was rushed. They almost completely got rid of the original story and like focus of the first two games, which was the bloodline. However, despite all of the flaws with Fable 3, you could tell there was love put into it, and you definitely could tell that it was supposed to be more. It was supposed to be a lot more, but because of the fact the game was rushed and only had roughly 2 years of development, it flopped. It didn't do well. By this time, not only is Molyneux tired of hearing about the Fable series, so are the brothers, so are the rest of the devs. This is all that Microsoft wants. All Microsoft wants from Lionhead Studios is Fable, Fable, Fable. And oh my god, are they so tired of it? They're still trying to get on the whole live action Kinect thing. This is very frustrating for a lot of the team, and this causes not only a lot of devs to leave in 2011, but also the brothers as well. I do want to say before I continue, Peter Molyneux was the face of Lionhead. Fable is usually known or referred to as his baby, but he's not the original idea behind it. Even though he did a lot of the talking and he was the face and was the one who really built up this game not only to higher ups in the video game industry, but to consumers as well, he didn't really have a lot to do with the overall development. This kind of really upset the people at Big Blue Box, including the brothers. With that being said though, they also acknowledged that without Molyneux, that this game wouldn't have been created in the first place. Before Fable had even came out, they were working on a couple other games. There was one that was an RPG focus and a couple other like really crazy, really innovative for their time RPG ideas. Because during this time, there was a rule that if your video game didn't have boobs or explosions or like a really cool title, it would not be sold. And this is why games, not only from Lionhead, but just overall that were like breaking these boundaries were so important. Despite Molyneux getting all the credit for these games, the brothers do appreciate what Molyneux did and their friendship with him. So Playground Games is currently working on the new Fable 4. It doesn't look like that the brothers are on the production company or working with them with the next Fable game. I don't even know if they've talked to them based off of everything that I could find. The direction that they're taking seems really interesting, and it seems like they're going to the original idea of Fable, of the original Fable game, where it focuses more on the actual stories of you know, fairy tales rather than just like fantasy, which, you know, I'm really excited for. In 2012, Microsoft releases Fable: The Journey. I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't know why they released it. I really don't know why they released this game. This game was supposed to be like a Connect game where you were riding through the forest as Teresa, and it was just very weird. And it was kind of like, why are you still trying to get the Kinect to work? You know, at this time, it's 2012, the popularity of the Wii is dying out. The only thing that's popular on the Kinect are just dance games, and it just was a really bad decision by Microsoft to keep this idea going. This causes a lot of the devs to leave. After a couple months of everybody leaving, Molyneux leaves himself. They didn't like where the direction of the company was heading, and I think a lot of people knew Molyneux himself, Lionhead wasn't going to last long. Fable Legends, a live action game, gets announced. This game was focused around several different heroes, where you pretty much go around a map and take care of enemies with your friends online. This game not only gets delayed several times, it just ends up never coming out. There was also like a couple, I think, online things that were released where you got to, like, I think one of them you got to like run around as like the puppet versions, like the doll versions. You know, like in Fable where you collect the dolls of like different heroes like Jack of Blades, Whisper, etc, etc. You get to play as those like little dolls and like kind of like go around and kill things. They come up with that. There's nothing that really sticks. The soul of the company, which were the brothers and the original devs from Bullfrog and just people who had been there from the beginning, they're all gone. And not only are they gone, they are sick of hearing about Fable. Microsoft wanted nothing but Fable from Lionhead, and at this point, they were just tired of it. 10 years after the release date of the original Fable, in 2014, Fable Anniversary comes out. One of the Carter brothers comes back for this. I don't think the other one does. I could only find something that said one of them came back, not the other, so to my knowledge, one of them didn't help. But shortly after, not that long after Fable Legends gets canned, Lionhead Studios itself also finds itself getting, as I said 2 seconds ago, canned. As I said earlier in the video, Molyneux kind of pulls a boogie and just like starts blaming, you know, just a lot. He really starts blaming a lot of the decisions on like financial advisors. After Lionhead Studios shuts down, an article comes out talking to several of the devs, including Peter Molyneux from the game. And this article is actually incredibly interesting, and not only is it interesting, it's very thorough. It goes a lot more thorough and gives a lot more itty-bitty nitty-gritty details, so I highly suggest that you check out this article. It's unclear to know whether they're still friends or not, the brothers and Molyneux, but at the same time, I don't think necessarily anybody's departure from Lionhead was as messy as comparative to like some other studios. Everybody seems to have gotten off on a good foot. Crunching was super bad during the early 2000s. It was, and it's still kind of bad too. And at this point, a lot of smaller studios are starting to come out with better games. Without Molyneux making all these bad decisions, or at least taking the advice from his financial advisors,
Not to make any excuses.
we would not have the original Fable, and we wouldn't have Fable 2. Without Fable 3, we might have not even had the success to Fable 4. I don't know about you guys or anybody else, but I am super excited for Fable 4. I'm super excited to see what Playground Games comes out with. It really seems like they're taking the whole approach of the fairy tale grim tale vibes that the first game originally had. And even if they don't really focus on the bloodline and Jack of Blades anymore, which I think would be kind of disappointing, it would make sense if they wanted to kind of give their own approach to what they feel like Fable should be. And you know what? I'm down for it. I'm really excited, and honestly, I'm way more excited for the next Fable game. More faithful in it. Does that make sense? I don't know. The combat looks so much fun, dude. But that is it. At the end of the day, there wasn't as much quote-unquote tea, piping hot tea. So if you came here for that, this wasn't really the video for it.
Does anybody want coffee?
But it still was extremely interesting. Like I said, before I started going into this, I really thought Peter Molyneux was the big brain behind Lionhead Studios and Fable. But it really goes to show how much work goes behind the face. Mr. Molyneux was the face of Lionhead, but it was not only just the two brothers, the Carter brothers, but all the other hardworking devs that really put this game series together. I know they may be tired of Fable, but I'll never be tired of the series. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. My name is Andraste. I also stream. I've been playing a lot of Dark Souls, and I'm actually about to beat Elden Ring. And speaking of Dragon Age, I'm going to be playing Dragon Age Inquisition on Nightmare mode, slightly modded. Mods were really fucking hard to do, but I was able to get some of it modded. I'm going to be doing that if you'd like to check that out. My Twitch link will be in the description below. And I really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. So cute. I could pinch your cheek. Let me pinch your cheek. You're so sweet. Thank you for coming. Have a good day, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.
Does anybody want coffee?